Hey folks, welcome into the Bleacher Nation Cubs Podcast. I am Brett Taylor, joined by Michael Cerami. We are here to talk Cubs, thanks to the generous contributions of our wonderful sponsor, Ankin Law, Howard Ankin and his crew. Injury law made personal, 3126 million. Or scan the QR code if you're watching on YouTube. That's how you're going to get Howard's number in your phone. And we appreciate them as always for letting us do what we do on this podcast, which is talk Cubs. So let's do that. Let's start with the games of this past week. So when we met to talk last week, the Cubs were wrapping up that series in Pittsburgh, which they ended up winning. This is why you must listen to the podcast, folks, because Michael, we thought he was joking at the time, but of course he was not. He was seeing into the seeing stone to predict almost to the batter what the Cubs were going to do to Paul Skeens in that game, which was even more impressive than what the Cubs did, was Michael predicting it. So kudos to you. It does mean that the Cubs go into the finale today, potentially, going to lose this series to the Pirates. That could happen. They're facing Paul Skeens.
No. What's going to happen is people are going to be listening and be like, man, these guys didn't know that they lit up Paul Skeens out after 2 1/3 inning, 4 runs, his first 4-walk game of the year. And
wow.
2 homers. I mean,
all in your shot.
Man, poor Brett and Michael. They didn't know that they were going to have such good times ahead of them.
I even got the number of walks right. That was pretty weird.
You got the number of walks right, and it was the most he'd walked all year. The most in a start, I think, since like August or something. The 3 home runs that he gave up to the Cubs were the most in his career. I could not find a game going back through college where he gave up 3 home runs in a game. He gave up 3 in an inning. And you said that shit was going to happen. So it's amazing.
For the Lord of the Rings fans out there, that was me looking into the Palantir seeing stone.
Palantir. It's so funny. I was trying to think of the name of it and I couldn't. Right.
I was like, should I bring this up? I'm like, we're already pretty nerdy. We present very nerdy.
Yeah, I was going to say, I got to believe the cross-section of listeners to a weekly Chicago Cubs podcast of this type, the Venn diagram then of other nerdery is probably a pretty sizable chunk.
Oh, yeah. I was just talking to my friends about this. Don't you think that baseball has the biggest Venn diagram overlap between
nerds?
Like fantasy book readers or D&D players or than any other sport? Like it's absolutely has to be the biggest overlap with baseball. And I don't know what that is exactly, but I definitely think that is true.
Do you know what else there's a huge overlap with? And I think that they're like separate parts of the Venn diagram. You'd have baseball in the middle, and then you'd have like these 2 offshoots. Is wrestling. Like there is a huge, enormous contingent of baseball fans that are also super hardcore into wrestling. And I could be wrong, but I think that's a separate sphere from those of us who are into the other nerd categories.
I was really into wrestling back in the day. I think there's something to do with like lore and being able to go deep in on stuff. Like baseball provides a lot of that, and I think that that's part of it. And wrestling sort of has that too, just with like a long history of storylines and arcs
and the storylines and yeah. Okay. So the Cubs played the heel on Thursday against.
That was a transition. Wrestling.
There we go. And the historic challenges that the Cubs have had then facing the Brewers, particularly in Milwaukee, they came out on top, winning 2 of 3. They couldn't sweep it. They have, this goes back many years, and I've checked the data. At least I did a season or 2 ago, and it's not anecdotal. The Cubs struggle on Sundays, man. They just cannot win on Sundays, particularly seems like if they're going for the sweep. So there's a tip to you if you're like weighing your game options and you really want to see the Cubs win, don't go on a Sunday. But they did take the series. Then they came home and they were facing the Giants, had that huge win on Monday, blew them out. The absurd 11th inning on Tuesday that decided that game really soured it, by the way. I'm actually going to linger on that game in a moment. And then, of course, they lost the series finale yesterday in a game where the offense just didn't show up. And I don't even mean that pejoratively. Like, they're not going to actually score 7, 8, 9 runs every single game. And, whatever, it's fine. So that's kind of where the week that was. And then we had one major news drop, of course, which was in Was it Sunday's or was it Saturday? Saturday or Sunday's game was when Shota Imanaga came up. That's right, because it was the pivotal inning on Sunday. Came up lame, running to first base to cover, had strained his hamstring. He and the Cubs say entirely unrelated to him having to depart his Pirates start early with cramping. Maybe it doesn't matter now.
It's probably one of those compensating things, right? Where maybe it's not directly related to it. But you're doing something different because of that. And that leads to the new injury. So indirectly related. Setting
the stage that this is a guy who's never had a lower body soft tissue injury before, ever. And he leaves consecutive starts with something, whether we call it cramping or straining. And we know that cramping is sometimes a precursor to strain. So I don't know. I don't know that I buy that it's entirely unrelated, but I appreciate that the Cubs are going to be cautious with him in terms of the shutdown. He's critically important to this team over the full season and into the postseason. Don't get me wrong. But right now, this window of time, particularly with the schedule that comes after the Mets series, it's pretty forgiving. And so if there was ever a time when the Cubs could, give Shota a month off to kind of rest, this is as good as it would get. So you don't like an injury, but this is about the best timing that the Cubs could have for it.
Yeah. I mean, I'll add that, this is where my silver lining thought immediately went to. Obviously, you don't want to lose Shota, especially after losing Steele. We're already on the 7th and 8th starting pitcher in the planned rotation.
Javier Assad is already out.
Assad's already out, exactly. And especially because Ben Brown is not leveled up. He's definitely flashed, some promise, and we know what he can be. But anyway, on Shota, I was thinking about it and I was like, okay, there was next to 0% chance that he was going to throw 32, maybe 33 starts this year, plus potentially, hopefully playoff starts. 0% chance. Was never going to happen. And it's just, it's partly him. It's partly the Cubs. It's partly the way baseball is nowadays. It just doesn't happen. So if he's going to miss some time, like you said, good time to miss it. And if he's going to miss some time because of an injury, prefer it be a lower body injury where it's not something that he will have to ramp back up from or present longer term concerns about his productivity. Obviously, your whole body plays into how well you're going to pitch and perform. Sure. But there's a big difference between your hamstring or your quad or any lower body injury and your elbow or your shoulder. It's not the same thing. So if they're going to miss some time, if it's going to provide him a opportunity to then pitch uninterrupted from June, whatever onward, okay, maybe that's just was always going to happen in one way. And this is pretty much the best circumstances under which that could have happened. So that's kind of why I didn't stress it too much. But listen, here's the part that does freak me out a little bit is Jameson Taillon has been pitching pretty great. And Matthew Boyd has been pitching pretty great. And and Colin Rea has been pitching pretty great. And all three of those individually and as a collective unit, I have very little faith in them continuing to pitch as well as they have. We have been fortunate as hell that those guys have been pitching the way they have. And that's not to say I don't like what they offer, but it's is anyone expecting that? I'm not. Colin Rea would have been in the rotation if the Cubs were expecting this from him.
Right.
So I don't know.
As opposed to him being the 8th option.
Yeah, exactly.
And we saw some of the potential warts with him this week. Sure. It was not a bad start against the Giants, but it was not, it was more what you would expect from a guy filling in where you're like, okay, it's a good fill in, where you're going to need the offense to carry the day and win the game, as opposed to what he has been, which is.
Did he always throw 95?
I love talking Colin Ray. No, he did not. He started to
every game I watch him this year. I'm like, which guy is this again? Does not match the memory I have of Colin Rea in my head.
No, back when he was he was with the Cubs briefly, obviously.
Yeah, no, right.
No, he was sort of a soft tossing guy. It started to tick up a little bit last year with the Brewers. Now, when the Cubs were signing him and I was looking back, and I had associated it with, he was doing these shorter burst outings. Some were like nominally starts, but they were mostly sort of semi-relief kind of things. And I thought that's what it was. I just thought it was, he knows he's only throwing 30 pitches, so he's amping it up. Turns out he was a guy who did serious work on some mechanical changes and some velocity training. His arm angle is pretty significantly different than it was a year and a half ago. And clearly it's working for him. Now, what's interesting with Colin Rea is, he's an example, and this is a thing that we always know is possible, right? Like we know basically never happens with position players that a guy fundamentally becomes a different player at 34, 35, 36.
No.
Like that just doesn't happen. You do occasionally, very rarely, see it with pitchers and sometimes usually relievers, sometimes starting pitchers. There are some historical example of dudes who just blew up in their mid 30s because big difference between hitting and pitching is you finally get a grip just right, or you add a new pitch, or you figure out mechanically how you can better work with your body. There are significant changes that can counteract the aging curve more with a pitcher than a position player. And so I certainly am watching Colin Rea closely in that respect, that you do wonder if he's one of those guys, because there are some differences. He added a new type of slider at the same time as he changed his arm angle pretty fundamentally. He's added a mile per hour that's right in that sweet spot of where it matters a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the huge
92,
difference.
93. Yep. And the lower release point on the fastball, it gives it just has that, it's that flatter plane, which we used to, it's so funny. We talk about baseball so differently than we used to 15, 20 years ago, when we would say a flat, straight fastball is terrible. Oh my gosh, this fastball is so flat, straight. Now, the flatter the approach angle and the straighter it is, which is actually a relative cut, is a beautiful fastball. And so
we know how to use that better now too, though. I think
for sure.
That's a big difference. You know what I mean? Like
where to attack and how. Yes.
Yeah. That's because there is certainly something to say about a pitch with no deception, or that doesn't tunnel with some other pitch that is, or is not, already starting at the top of the zone. Like they might just be using that type of fastball better, which is like a fun way that baseball has evolved.
And it's, I'll note too, just general point, Cubs really seem to love those three things when it comes to fastballs. They really love a lower, it's not necessarily a low slot, but it's a low release point. Like guys, good extension. And they sort of like picture Craig Kimbrell, where he would really get out there really far, and he's releasing from a low release height. They really like that. They like it when it has ride up in the zone. Of course, that's true. That one's pretty universal. And they like relative cut on the four seamer. And if you got those three things, you are their dream pitcher as far as fastballs go. But circling back, your point is very well taken, that losing Shota Imanaga, who, by the way, good results this year, but some kind of unnerving underperformance under the hood, that perhaps this reset will help him in that regard. Do you know his fastball was rating out as one of the worst in baseball this year? Him with the special fastball that did him so well last year, mostly because he wasn't locating it very well. He was kind of down in the zone, and we know he needs to live at the top.
He's got to hit the top, right?
But so
maybe Jamison Tyone did a Space Jam to him, because his fastball is playing up this year.
He has, yes, it is. So anyway, point taken that the Cubs have been getting tremendous results from guys that we will question fairly, I think, whether those tremendous results will continue. Now, I'm going to set aside, unless you want to get into it too deeply, it's not official. Dave Kaplan has said today, we're recording on Thursday, that he's heard Cade Horton is coming to join the Cubs. They need that first fill-in start on Saturday. To me, the tea leaves sure look like it's Cade Horton because of how the Cubs have used Jordan Wicks is not available. Chris Flexen has pitched back-to-back days now in relief. So I don't know. To me, it seems pretty obvious. So
I'll tell you that I heard twice from two different sources behind the scenes, two different ones, that it's Cade. So once Kaplan came out and said it too, that was like, okay. So, I mean, for those listening at home, sometimes you hear stuff that's like not quite reportable. It's like not really above
Sure.
that threshold. So I'm only saying it now because Kaplan already put it out there. It seems pretty likely that it's going to be Cade Horton. I mean, all the logic pointed that way anyway. So no surprises there.
Yeah, and sometimes things happen too, where it's like this is several days in advance. Because there are roster implications, the Cubs are very unlikely to announce it way in advance because they know they are going to have to open up a 26-man spot. They are going to have to open up a 40-man spot. And so even if he were flying with the team today to New York, which I think is what Cap had heard, they're not going to say he's the guy until right then.
We just, what a good point to linger on. I think people will find this a little interesting. This is another thing, is that sometimes things that we hear are true and then don't end up becoming the move. For example, we hear, I'm going to make this up, but it's like, let's say we heard Cade Horton's traveling with the team. There could have been a version of that doesn't result in him being added to the roster and starting for whatever external reason that occurs. And so that's the reason that some of the times, we hear things but don't report them, and or someone very credible does report something that ends up being not accurate. And it's like, well, no, they were correct, but now they can't explain why their report was wrong in retrospect because it might reveal some other source or piece of information that they're not supposed to share. So that's just an interesting thing to keep in mind when you see these kind of reports from guys like Kaplan or Jesse Rogers. Like, listen, they know what they're talking about. They have very good sources and tend to be pretty correct. Even when sometimes it's something comes up after the fact and you're like, oh, that wasn't right. It's like, it might've been at the time.
Yeah, like hedging isn't always about protecting the reporter. Sometimes it's hedging because the real world has bumps in it, and sometimes things happen. And with this, it's not at all hard to imagine a guy travels with the team, throws a partial bullpen to ramp up, feels like not great, not an injury, but just sort of not great. And they're like, okay, let's go ahead and make alternative plans for Saturday. And then suddenly everyone looks wrong. They're like, well, it was supposed to be Cade on Saturday. So anyway, that's why I don't know. I don't want to go too deep on it yet.
Yeah. I just wanted to get into the meta of the reporting.
Yeah. Beautiful. And I would say that from a fan perspective, hopefully he does make the start, because I'm itching to see Cade Horton in the big leagues, and I think most Cubs fans are. Tough first assignment there against the Mets in New York.
Screw it. Let's go. Rip off the Band-Aid, baby. Yeah.
And if it doesn't go well, chill, because the schedule eases up considerably after that, and he'd have some tasty matchups thereafter. If
it does go well, Cy Young, Rookie of the Year, MVP,
Rookie of the Year, why not?
Game 1 World Series PPI. Starter.
So then let's circle back, if we can, to the Tuesday loss to the Giants, which was the 11th inning implosion. Couple general points before you can even really talk about the 11th, because I know people will say it. One, it is cool and exciting. They came back in the 9th. That was fun to tie it up. That's what this offense is. They really go strong 1 through 9, have really good at bats. And you can tell already
4 through 9, they start slow. I feel like it's always like the second time through and do something.
Right. But you could tell that they are a lineup that other teams are sort of like, okay, well, but 3-run lead, 4-run lead, whatever, we still got to get through this through the end. And I know what it's like to be on the other side of that. So it's gratifying to be watching that, where I, as a fan of the Cubs, don't ever really feel like it's over. But that game, of course, Cubs got brilliant set of bullpen performances. Colin Rea, competitive start, but he didn't hold the Giants down completely, but the bullpen did. Held him down to the 11th. And that's when Ryan Pressly entered. Interesting, because typically in a home game that goes to extras with a fresh closer, you would see that closer in the 10th, on the hoping that it would end in the bottom of the 10th. So typically that's the inning where you would see your closer. Now, why do we not see Ryan Pressly? Is it because he's not the closer anymore? Or is it because the Cubs know that he can't miss bats right now at all?
Yeah.
And you know where you don't want to use a guy who can't miss bats? When giving up 1 run could sink the game, and that 1 run starts out freebie on second base. I could not think of a worse pitcher to have in an extra innings game right now than this version of Ryan Pressly. Now, I'm not saying he'll forever be this. Maybe, there are some articles out there, sometimes The Athletic with Tommy Hotovy talking about, well, maybe he's not tipping his pitches, but kind of showing a little too early so they can work on that. Fine. Maybe so. But let's be honest. He's 36. The trend lines that are the most alarming this year, the contact, the strikeouts being down, the walks being up, the fastball being just an almost useless pitch. Those trend lines started last year. And we talked about it when the Cubs were acquiring Pressly as a pretty clear backup plan to their efforts to sign Tanner Scott, that, okay, understandable. They're getting him super cheap. The Astros are eating a ton of his salary. The Cubs gave up sort of a very marginal prospect in Juan Bello for him. There's a reason for that. And there's a reason the Astros just were like, hey, we'll take anything if you'll take $8.5 million of his salary. And so I don't think it's fair for the Cubs to be precious about Ryan Pressly's role or spot on the roster, frankly, if it continues that he is just giving up contact, almost regardless of the quality of contact. When your strikeout rate is under 10% and you have a negative walk rate, strikeout rate minus walk rate is negative.
It's terrible.
It's
when starting pitcher Colin Rea throws harder than your closer in 2025. I remember I texted you literally the first game of the season, or the first game that he appeared in. Yeah. And I was like, does Pressly throw 92.5, 93 miles an hour? How do you have a closer? I'm sorry. I mean, obviously pitchers can succeed without premium velocity. I'm not saying that that's not the case, but there is truly in this day and age, no reason to have a closer on a contending team that can't throw 95 or above. It is absurd. It is malpractice. It's incorrect, wrong. Nope. Can't have it, because at a minimum, at the absolute minimum, for whatever ceiling that provides you, having more premium velocity, it provides the floor of having the ability to miss bats when you don't have your best stuff or your best command. He's not even, I'm like kind of getting annoyed talking about it, because I'm not saying that they needed to, they didn't get Tanner Scott, right? Okay. He's having a great start to his year, 2.04 ERA. Yep. I mean, the peripherals aren't as good, but he's getting it done and he's throwing hard. It feels to me like they went, well, we got to get someone that's a closer, and it's like, what you could have done? What you could have done is not, God, I hate this, but sometimes it does work out for Jed Hoyer and Tom Ricketts. I get it. Sometimes it does work out. This was we'll see who's left and get what we could get. And we might get some value out of doing that. And guess what? It's biting them in the ass big time. There were a ton.
That's who it was. It's I don't want to lose sight of the fact that it did their plan post Scott was clearly well, we got to get somebody and then we'll see what happens. And that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what happened, right? It was Ryan Brazier. He became basically available for free, had been very successful for 2 years with the Dodgers, but then he's been hurt and we don't even talk about him. So it did not work this time.
It didn't work. And I'm saying even Pressly though is not, I'm not saying he was I was into the idea of acquiring him despite the words, just like I was into the idea of getting Hector Neris, because you're okay, maybe, there was some, red flags, but this is still a guy who's done that, been there, has the experience, the stuff historically, but it's been really bad. And this is all against the backdrop of an exceptionally deep free agent relief class. I remember an article, I listed 18 free agent relievers, as of February, that were still available. And they did not get any of them. It is so ridiculous. And it's the same process by which they, their entire ethos as an organization. And it does work sometimes. And I get that, but sometimes it's this, and it costs them games. And it's Ryan Pressly's not the answer. It's not the answer. It's pretty bad and pretty clear. And he cannot get the next save opportunity. It needs to be Porter Hodge.
No. And I would say too that this entire conversation would be, for me at least, identical whether he gave up 4 hits and 2 runs in that game and the Cubs lost, or if it was a historic 9 runs.
Oh, it doesn't even
8
matter.
batters in a row. 8 batters in a row, not 0 outs. That just, to me, that was just sort of like, it was like the universe saying, hey, seriously, are you paying attention to this? Because it was not new. And so, like I said, where I leave this topic is, as you said, there's one point. Those highest leverage moments now need to be Porter Hodge. I suspect they might already be, because again, it was Hodge that got the 10th, not Presley. Presley was held back like, maybe we won't use, because the game could have ended. In fact, should have ended in the bottom of the 10th. Learning moment for Pete Crow Armstrong is if that winning run is on third base and there's 1 out and first base is open and the only run that matters is the run on third base, you're not going to get anything to hit. Like
that was
had to be
his
aware
worst
of that
at bat as a rookie,
or
as
I'm sure he would say this
young professional.
That was bad. I'm sure he would say the same thing too in hindsight. I get the excitement because he's thinking all I got to do is put it in play and we win. Well, the Giants know that too. And so just learn from that one. But again,
that breaking ball
Cubs
he was getting was pretty devastating though. That was,
it was nasty, but
tough.
it was also
nasty.
The first 3 of them didn't even start in the zone. And it's like, brother, come on.
He had stars in his eyes. He was like, I'm going to be on ESPN tonight. They're going to be talking about me.
Listen, if I'm up there in that about him, I want it. Yeah. Because 9 times out of 10, that energy is what gets the Cubs really good results. So don't change anything. Just be maybe situationally aware. So Cubs could have, should have won that one, but it was Hodge that got the 10th. And that's when the game would have ended. Presley doesn't even come in. So again, I don't think these things are unknown to the Cubs. I think they are very aware of what we're talking about. We'll see if there's anything that happens roster-wise. I will say, didn't love after the game. Presley said all the right things in terms of like, it's on me, I didn't get my job done. But then he's saying, I thought my pitches were good. I feel completely healthy.
That was and it's psychotic thing to say.
I hear that and I'm like, oh, well then that's not good, right? If that's that's best,
worse.
That's not good. I was hoping he was gonna be like, knee was barking a little bit. And so we'll see. The Cubs knew they had an off day today. They knew they weren't probably going to bring in anyone yesterday. So I'm not surprised no roster move yesterday, but we'll see if they do anything in advance of New York. And if not, then they're just going to have to hide him for a while and hope he can get some, productivity back in the middle innings. But at least with Presley, it's going to be easy to know what we're looking for. We're looking for him to start missing bats again. And if it doesn't happen, then
like
nothing else.
Like one.
Yeah, like Eddie. Like a bat. Okay. So we're going to switch to the game in a moment. Before we do, I want to make sure to mention, so today is Thursday, May 8th, May 17th, Saturday at HVAC in Wrigleyville. Cubs are playing the White Sox that afternoon. But before that, and if you want to watch it, if you want to come hang with me and Michael, we're going to be at HVAC in Wrigleyville for a watch party. Thanks in large part to our great sponsors, Ankin Law. I'm really looking forward to it because it's going to Wrigley, of course, is great. Cubs White Sox is its own animal at Wrigley, but there's something sometimes about being in a bar at Wrigleyville when there's a game going on at Wrigleyville. It's like you get a lot of the enjoyable energy, but without quite the same intensity. And sometimes you want that. Sometimes awesome. You want to just be like, sitting back, chilling with people. And so I'm really looking forward to that. So if you want to do that, make sure you check out, we have posted about it a good bit. You should be able to find the RSVP link. Okay. Now we're going to transition to the game.
So today's game is brought to you by Feldco, the home renewal experts. Bleacher Nation is proud to partner with Feldco. For almost 50 years, Feldco has been transforming Chicagoland homes with their windows, siding, doors, and roofing. Feldco is family-owned and prides themselves on delighting their customers. With products made in the U.S. and designed specifically for the Midwest, Feldco offers the perfect balance of beauty and energy efficiency. God, I nailed that. God,
that
sounded so good at reading.
Like that sounded like a real podcast ad.
Wow, sure. We're real guys.
Not pre-recorded, folks. Not pre-recorded. No. That was live.
This is
okay.
Real. We're legit.
So here's the game.
Let's do it.
It's a little more conversational. Like you kind of triggered for me a different thinking that I thought would be interesting based on the last one. And so I think it has become pretty clear, as we sit here today on May 8th, at least, that the Cubs have three main issues that you could look at. This is a very good team, but there are three pretty clear things that you would look at and say, oof, I wish that was better. And I'm going to touch on each of those. And here's where you're going to play the role of empowered, aggressive, dream-filled, but realistic front office member, okay? So you are running the Cubs, Michael, and I want to know, realistically, but aggressively and dream-like, how are you going to deal with these three issues, okay? So it's how would you fix it, okay? So let's start right where we ended that conversation, okay? Is the Cubs obviously have a back-end bullpen problem. I want to know, how would you fix it as we sit here today, or looking forward? You could think about it as a trade deadline thing. You could think about it. Just how would you proceed, Michael, to fix this issue? Dream big, but be realistic.
Okay. I have some. Okay. So first and foremost, like we sort of ended that conversation on, Porter Hodge is the closer starting tomorrow. Okay. Ryan Presley either needs to figure, maybe make sure that knee is feeling all right, with a couple of 10 days or 15-day break, just throwing out random number there. And
however many days it takes. Yeah.
Yeah, however many days. Okay, and then here's where I think you could get a little bit creative now, and then I'll do one in the future a little bit. I don't think the Cubs need to be abandoning Ben Brown as a starting pitcher. I don't think that is necessarily the case. But with Cade Horton coming up, we go through these next 3-4 weeks, month. When Shota comes back, if Cade Horton is still pitching well, I think you keep Colin Rea, or hopefully you soon thereafter get Javier Assad back. And then you start to, which may have been necessary anyway, limit Ben Brown's innings by transitioning him into the bullpen for the rest of the year, where we know his particular two-pitch mix and velocity can play up, and start him in a lower level, maybe 7th inning, or one of those games where the Cubs have a 1-run deficit. So holding that to just 1 run is still important. Brad Keller gets some of those
medium leverage, we would call it.
Medium leverage opportunities, and slowly ascending him up the reverse roster of the bullpen, where I think he can eventually make a pretty big impact. And that's sort of like in the next month or two, how you can kind of go about addressing that. Basically filtering Hodge into a higher leverage role, bringing in a starter, getting Shota or Assad back, and then having Ben Brown sort of transition into a role that I think we know he can handle. And it doesn't have to be a multi-inning thing. He can be a true 1-inning high octane reliever. So that's how I think I would go about that. And then I'm going to have to assume that something's wrong with David Robertson, that he is gained 800 pounds over the offseason, and his elbow has fallen off, and he can't see out of his right eye, and he hates the city of Chicago. There's no reason that the stats and underlying performance of the guy that we saw last year isn't signed this year by some team, let alone the Cubs. So if none of that's the case, it's absolutely absurd that he's not signed. And then the Cubs have to look to the trade deadline, and unfortunately they have to do what they should have done in the offseason for just money, but by using significant prospect capital to acquire someone, because Porter Hodge is good and I trust him. I genuinely do. I think he could be a great closer for the Cubs. They don't have really anyone else. Like Julian Merriweather looks pretty good at times, but they don't have what they need to have to compete in the postseason right now, period. They do not have the bullpen. And so you need to go add at least another one surefire reliever, while hoping some guys develop along the way, Tyson Miller, whatever. And that's going to cost prospects, but they need to do it. And so that's my short-term, medium-term, and then trade deadline, what they need to do for the playoff, adjusting the bullpen. Did that answer it?
I think that sounds like a perfectly appropriate plan. Realistic, but also hopeful. Okay. Next issue that I think everyone can agree on, third base is a problem. We've seen how the Cubs have been handling it, but you, Michael, you step into the situation. What are you doing about third base?
What is the material that in Back to the Future, Doc and Marty need to get a bunch of plutonium or something?
Plutonium. Yeah, it's plutonium.
Okay. The Cubs need to get some plutonium. Then
step one.
Yeah, a flux capacitor. Attach
Easy.
it to Jed's. Yep. Attach it to Jed's. Very sensible Honda Civic, because they hold their value. It's really good stuff. It's a smart car to invest in if you think about it. And then you drive 88 miles per hour down 90 or Lakeshore Drive, and you go back in time. You sign Alex Bregman. And then hope he continues to hit 327, 401, 612 with a 180 weighted runs created plus positive defensive metrics at third base and 2.1 WAR to solve the Cubs' third base problem immediately. That's it, though. I think that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I would say that's dreamlike and realistic. Clearly,
I don't even want to answer seriously. That's how I want to do it.
No. Those films were documentary, right?
Documentaries. They were only off by a year on the World Series. Pretty good.
Hey, there you go. Okay. I mean, yeah, there's not necessarily a better answer available than that, because I think the real answer is, I don't know, hope Matt Shaw breaks out over the next month.
That's it.
I think this is going to be an issue. This is going to be an issue at least until the trade deadline, and then we'll see who becomes available. Okay, last one. In some ways, I think the easiest one is the front of the rotation, and it is a problem insofar as, you'll recall, all offseason, we were saying the Cubs needed to add an impact starter. And that was before they lost Justin Steele, before Shota Imanaga had this injury. And I think it still stands to reason that, particularly as you're looking ahead to the postseason, and especially sans Justin Steele, I see it as a problem. I see them handling it well right now, but I see it as a problem. And I'm curious, how do you deal with that problem?
Yeah, I mean, so this one I'm going to answer seriously, but continue to be dreamlike, in that I think the Cubs need to extend Kyle Tucker so that they can use Owen Casey and or Kevin Alcantara as significant trade chips, AAA, but MLB door knocking prospects that are among the top 100, depending on what list you're looking at, to acquire a starting pitcher that I also think, ideal world, isn't a rental, is probably someone that maybe costs a little bit more money, has a little bit more shelf life ahead of him, because you're those are significant chips to trade, even if you have PCA and Kyle Tucker in place, let's say, for 2 out of, and then Hap has his extension, but it runs out after next year. Getting rid of one or both of those guys, they can weather that. That's okay. But it would be nicer let me reshape this. I'd rather pay more overall and then get a guy that will extend through this next 1 to 3 year window, or whatever it may be, when Suzuki's still around, Shota's still around, Hap's still around, Carson Kelly, maybe. That's what I'd like to do. See them get a guy that can contribute this year and can contribute in the future. One of the guys that I really like on that front is Pablo Lopez. Probably going to be available, costs a little bit more money, has a little bit of control, but is pitching really well and has a good track record of pitching well and throws hard and, is a righty. So it's a nice little different look for the front of the rotation paired with Shota Imanaga. And then next year you have Shota, Steele, and Lopez, theoretically at some point. Steele, we don't know when he'll be back exactly, but that's nice. That's a good thing to have. And so I'm not saying it has to be him exactly, but someone like him. And that all is, based on the ability to extend Kyle Tucker, because otherwise I genuinely just don't think you could trade Owen Casey and Kevin Alcantara right now. So that's how I would do that. Yeah,
I dig it. I think we differ slightly on the need to extend Kyle Tucker. I certainly agree with you that it makes it a whole lot more comfortable and easy to trade those guys if you know you have Tucker locked up. But I think as the season is trending, it's going to become too appealing to add an impact starting pitcher to this particular club with the chances that this club could win, to avoid it if that chance becomes available. You know, if you got the right trade partner that wants one of these guys, even if you haven't extended Tucker, that you might just have to pull the trigger.
And they will.
Okay. And I know and they will.
Yeah.
But it would be nice to know that you already have Tucker locked up. Okay, good stuff. Good thing. I think we'll leave it there. This is the Bleacher Nation Cubs podcast, brought to you by Ankin Law. Injury law made personal, 312-6-million. And we appreciate you folks as always. Hope you have a good weekend. Hope the Cubs fare well in New York, and hopefully we get to see Cade Horton. All right, take care, everyone.